Neighbor stole my baby at the park and claimed she adopted him first. What started as a normal day at the park turned into every parent's worst nightmare, all because of an entitled neighbor who'd been secretly watching my family for months. My wife and I had our first child last year, a beautiful baby boy. We'd tried for years to have a baby, going through multiple rounds of IVF before finally succeeding. Our son means everything to us. We moved to a quiet suburban neighborhood when my wife was pregnant, thinking it would be the perfect place to raise our family. The incident happened about 2 months ago, when our son was 8 months old. It was a beautiful Saturday morning, and I'd taken him to the local park while my wife was at a yoga class. He loves the baby swings, and I always enjoy our weekend daddy-son time. We'd been at the park for about 20 minutes when I noticed a woman watching us. She was sitting on a nearby bench, probably in her mid-40s, dressed in expensive-looking athleisure wear. Something about the way she stared made me uncomfortable, but I tried to brush it off. Living in a small community, you often see the same faces around. After a few more minutes in the swing, my son started fussing, his signal that he needed a diaper change. I grabbed the diaper bag from under the stroller and took him to the park's family restroom. That's when things got weird. As I was finishing up the diaper change, I heard the restroom door open. The woman from the bench walked in, smiling at us in a way that sent chills down my spine. "Oh, there's my sweet boy," she cooed, reaching for my son. I immediately pulled him closer to me. "Excuse me? This is my son." She laughed, but there was something off about it. No, you must be confused. I adopted him first. The agency just made a mistake with the paperwork." My heart started racing. This woman was clearly delusional, but she was blocking the only exit. I needed to stay calm and think clearly. "Ma'am, I don't know who you are, but this is my biological son. My wife and I had him through IVF. Please move away from the door." Her face hardened. "Stop lying. I've been watching him for months. I know he's meant to be mine. The adoption agency promised me a baby boy, but then they said there was a mistake. But I know the truth. They gave him to you instead." She lunged forward suddenly, trying to grab my son. I turned to shield him with my body, but she was surprisingly strong. She managed to get her hands on him and started pulling. "Give me my baby," she screamed, yanking at his clothes. My son started wailing, and something in me snapped. I'm not a violent person, but when someone tries to hurt your child, instinct takes over. I pushed her back firmly with my free arm, just enough to create space between us. "Help!" I shouted as loud as I could. "Someone call the police." The woman stumbled backward but quickly regained her balance. "You're hurting me," she shrieked. "Help! He's trying to kidnap my baby." I heard running footsteps outside. The door burst open, and 2 other dads I recognized from the playground rushed in. They took in the scene, me holding my crying son, the wild-eyed woman trying to grab him. "Call 911, I yelled to them. "She tried to take my baby." One of the dads already had his phone out. The other positioned himself between me and the woman, who was now alternating between crying and screaming that I was kidnapping her son. "It's okay, buddy," I whispered to my son, trying to calm him while keeping an eye on the woman. "Daddy's got you. You're safe." The police arrived within minutes. By then, quite a crowd had gathered outside the restroom. The woman was still ranting about adoption agencies and stolen babies when the officers led her away in handcuffs. I gave my statement to the police, hands shaking as I held my son. That's when I learned the woman's name. She lived just 3 houses down from us. She'd been watching our family this whole time, apparently convinced that our son was somehow meant to be hers. The police found disturbing evidence when they searched her house: photos of my son taken through our windows, copies of our daily routines written in notebooks, even a fully furnished nursery. She'd been planning this for months. But the story doesn't end there. What happened next revealed an even darker pattern of behavior that nobody in our quiet neighborhood had noticed. The detective assigned to our case, Detective Rodriguez, came to our house the next day. She sat with my wife and me at our kitchen table while our son napped upstairs, monitored by a new video baby monitor we'd bought immediately after the incident. "We've been looking into your neighbor's background," Detective Rodriguez said, her expression grave. "This isn't the first time she's done something like this." My wife gripped my hand under the table as the detective continued. "She's been involved in similar incidents in 3 other states. She moves to a new area, fixates on a baby that matches her ideal adoption criteria, and starts stalking the family. She was actually banned from adopting through any legitimate agency 5 years ago due to concerning psychological evaluations." "How was she able to keep doing this?" I asked, feeling sick to my stomach. "She's wealthy enough to move whenever things get too hot, and she's always managed to avoid serious charges by claiming mental health issues," Detective Rodriguez explained. "But this time is different. We have multiple witnesses, security camera footage from the park, and physical evidence from her home. She's not walking away from this one." The detective showed us photos of items found in our neighbor's house. There were fake adoption papers with our son's name on them, altered to show her as the adoptive mother. She had receipts for baby furniture and clothes matching what we had. She'd even created a fake social media presence documenting her adoption journey with photos of our son stolen from my wife's private Instagram account. "We also found correspondence with someone who creates forged documents," Detective Rodriguez added. "It looks like she was planning to take your son and flee to Canada with fake papers." My wife burst into tears. I wrapped my arm around her, trying to process how close we'd come to losing our baby. The investigation revealed more disturbing details about our neighbor. She'd been leaving her house at night to walk around our property, sometimes standing outside our son's nursery window for hours. She'd made copies of our house keys by bribing a local locksmith. She even had a detailed plan written out for how she would transition our son to calling her mommy. The whole neighborhood was shocked. People started coming forward with stories about odd encounters they'd had with her. One mom said she'd caught her taking photos of children at the local playground. Another neighbor remembered her asking detailed questions about our family's schedule. We immediately filed for a restraining order and installed a comprehensive security system. The neighborhood watch program was revitalized, with everyone keeping an eye out for suspicious behavior. The district attorney decided to pursue maximum charges: attempted kidnapping, stalking, harassment, and a host of other violations. Our neighbor's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal based on mental health issues, but the DA wouldn't budge, not with the mountain of evidence they had. The preliminary hearing was intense. Our neighbor showed up in court looking completely different: no more designer clothes, wearing minimal makeup, trying to appear meek and confused. But when she saw me and my wife in the courtroom, her mask slipped. "My baby!" she suddenly shrieked, lunging toward us. "You stole my baby!" The bailiffs had to restrain her as she thrashed and screamed. Her lawyer looked mortified, especially when she started ranting about the adoption agency's conspiracy against her. The judge wasn't impressed by her performance. "Remove the defendant until she can control herself," he ordered. They had to practically drag her from the courtroom. When the hearing resumed, her lawyer tried to argue that she needed mental health treatment, not prison. But the prosecutor was ready. She presented evidence from psychiatrists who had evaluated our neighbor after previous incidents. They testified that while she did have mental health issues, she was fully aware of her actions and their consequences. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, "this defendant has a pattern of calculated, premeditated behavior. She stalks families, creates elaborate cover stories, and plans her attacks meticulously. This isn't someone acting on delusions. This is someone who knowingly terrorizes families." The case went to trial 3 months later. Every day in court was draining, but we knew we had to see it through. Our neighbor's previous victims even flew in to testify. Their stories were chillingly similar to ours. One mother broke down on the stand describing how our neighbor had almost succeeded in taking her daughter from daycare by presenting forged custody papers. Another family had to move across the country after she started sending their baby girl presents and calling herself Mommy. During cross-examination, our neighbor's true personality emerged. She became hostile when challenged, sneering at the prosecution's questions and making thinly veiled threats. At one point, she looked directly at my wife and said, "You'll see. He'll be with his real mommy soon. The jury took less than 2 hours to reach a verdict, guilty on all counts. The judge didn't hold back during sentencing. The evidence shows a disturbing pattern of predatory behavior, he said sternly. You've left a trail of traumatized families across multiple states. It's clear that you pose an ongoing danger to children and their parents. He sentenced her to 15 years in prison with mandatory psychiatric treatment, followed by lifetime probation. She's also permanently banned from coming within 1,000 feet of any school, daycare, or playground. When they led her away, she started screaming again. "This isn't over. He's my son, you'll see." The bailiff had to forcibly remove her from the courtroom. It was the last time we saw her, but her words still haunt us sometimes. The aftermath changed our community forever. Our neighborhood started a support group for families affected by stalking and harassment. We worked with local law enforcement to implement better security measures at parks and playgrounds. The locksmith who helped our neighbor was charged and lost his license. My wife and I went to therapy to deal with the trauma. It took months before we felt comfortable taking our son to the park again. We still get anxious when strangers pay too much attention to him, but we're working on finding a balance between caution and paranoia. Our son is too young to remember what happened, thank goodness. But someday we'll have to tell him about the neighbor who thought she could steal him away. We'll tell him how our community came together to protect him, and how love and justice prevailed over obsession and entitlement. For now, we're focusing on healing and moving forward. We've made our home more secure, but we refuse to live in fear. Our neighbor took enough from us. She doesn't get to take our peace of mind, too. The house where she lived stands empty. Nobody wants to buy it, knowing what happened there. Sometimes I see people slow down as they drive past, whispering about the crazy baby snatcher who once lived in our quiet neighborhood. But life goes on. Our son is growing into a happy, healthy toddler. He lights up our world every day, reminding us that all the pain and stress was worth it to keep him safe. And if sharing our story helps even one other family recognize the warning signs of a predator, then something good will have come from this nightmare. Update. A lot has happened since my original post 6 months ago, and I think it's time to share the full story of what we discovered after the trial. First, thank you to everyone who sent supportive messages and shared their own stories. It helped more than you know to realize we weren't alone in dealing with this kind of situation. The biggest development came about 2 months after the sentencing. Detective Rodriguez called us to share some disturbing news they'd uncovered while processing our neighbor's electronics. We found evidence that she was part of an online group, the detective explained when we met at the station. People who share techniques for stalking families and stealing children. They call themselves second chance parents. My wife grabbed my hand so hard her nails dug into my palm. There are more people like her? The detective nodded grimly. The FBI has been investigating this group for months. Your case helped break it wide open. They've arrested 12 members so far across 6 states. It turns out our neighbor had been learning from and advising other would-be kidnappers. They shared tips about forging documents, tracking family routines, and even how to manipulate mental health evaluations to avoid prison time. The good news, Detective Rodriguez continued, is that your neighbor's conviction has led to several plea deals. Other group members are cooperating with authorities to avoid her fate. The investigation revealed something else that made my blood run cold. Our neighbor hadn't picked our family at random. She'd been monitoring local IVF clinic success stories on social media, specifically targeting families who'd struggled to conceive. She thought we'd be too grateful to have a baby to take proper security precautions. But the most shocking revelation came from her ex-husband. He contacted us through our lawyer, wanting to apologize for not warning our community about her. I should have said something when I saw her move to your neighborhood, he told us over a video call, but she threatened to reveal secrets that would destroy my new marriage. I was a coward, and your family almost paid the price. He explained that their marriage had ended after she became obsessed with adopting a baby boy. When legitimate agencies rejected her, she started stalking local families. She even tried to convince people that her stepson was actually her biological child. She's always been manipulative, he said, but it got worse after she joined that online group. They encouraged each other's delusions and shared strategies for reclaiming children they believed were rightfully theirs. The FBI investigation led to more arrests and helped reunite two children who had actually been abducted by group members in other states. It was heartbreaking but validating to know our case had helped stop these predators. Our neighborhood has changed too. The empty house finally sold to a lovely family with teenage kids, thankfully. They've been wonderful about letting us install extra security cameras facing their property, understanding our paranoia. We've become closer with our other neighbors. The dads who helped us at the park that day are now among our closest friends. We have monthly block parties and a neighborhood text alert system. Everyone looks out for each other's kids. The support group we started has grown into a non-profit organization helping families affected by stalking and attempted kidnapping. We provide resources, legal advice, and emotional support. My wife now volunteers as a victim advocate, turning our trauma into something positive. Our son just turned 1, and we had a big birthday party in our backyard. Watching him toddle around, surrounded by loving friends and neighbors, I felt overwhelming gratitude. We could have lost all of this if things had gone differently that day at the park. We still get updates about our neighbor through the victim notification system. She's already had 3 disciplinary incidents in prison for trying to contact families of other inmates' children. The psychiatric team says her obsession hasn't diminished despite treatment. Some nights I still wake up in a cold sweat, remembering her words in court. This isn't over. But then I look at our security cameras, think about our strengthened community, and remember that we're not the same vulnerable family we were back then. Last week, we got a letter from another family in California. They recognized our neighbor's photo from a news story about the FBI investigation. She had been stalking them right before moving to our neighborhood. They never knew her name until now, but they remembered a strange woman taking photos of their baby at the grocery store. "Thank you for stopping her," they wrote. "We always felt like something bad almost happened to us, but we couldn't prove it. Now we know we weren't crazy." That's why I'm sharing this update. These predators count on our silence and our shame. They want us to feel crazy for suspecting them. But the more we share our stories, the harder it is for them to operate in the shadows. To any parent reading this, trust your instincts. If someone's attention to your child feels wrong, it probably is. Don't worry about seeming rude or paranoid. Your child's safety matters more than a stranger's feelings. Our neighbor will be in prison for a long time, but we know there are others like her out there. The best defense is awareness and community support. We're stronger together than alone. As for us, we're finally starting to feel normal again. Our son is happy and thriving. Yes, we're more cautious than we used to be, but we refuse to let fear rule our lives. After all, we won. She tried to destroy our family, but instead, she made us stronger. Detective Rodriguez still checks in occasionally. Last time, she told us the FBI investigation has expanded to Europe, where they've found similar groups operating. Our case is being used to train law enforcement about these organized stalking networks. Sometimes I drive past the park where it all happened. I see families playing, kids laughing, parents chatting on benches. But now there are new security cameras, better lighting, and emergency call boxes. Something good came from our nightmare after all. Our son may never remember what happened that day, but someday he'll understand why his community is so protective, why his parents are so vigilant. He'll know that he was worth fighting for, and that love is stronger than obsession. For now, we're focusing on making happy memories to outweigh the bad ones. And if our story helps even one other family stay safe, then sharing it was worth it. Final edit. Thank you again for all the support. Several people have asked if we're writing a book about our experience. We're actually working with a child safety advocate to develop educational materials for parents and communities. Sometimes the best way to heal is to help others.